Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast, hosted by ID3. This show is designed to provide an exclusive forum on educational achievement gaps related to learning success while discovering relationships and family issues in diverse settings.
All right. Well, this is another night of the Impact of Educational Leadership. This is episode 23. I'm your host, ID3. Tonight we have some special guests. We have the one and only Rick Bolay. He is here along with Dr. Buddy Thornton. Gentlemen, please say hello to the people.
Hello to the people. Good evening, everybody. It's a thrill to be here and an honor.
All right, so tonight's topic is how to benefit educators' social and emotional health. In the arena of education, it has been assumed that students should leave their feelings at the door. They are serious about learning and want to be successful. Academic and social emotional issues are considered separate, and anything that doesn't directly relate to students' academic performance must be dealt with outside the classroom. Educators are constantly trying to find and create meaningful opportunities for students to build social and emotional abilities in a diverse and culturally responsive way. Social emotional learning, SEL for short, is used to help individuals learn to acquire the tools, the knowledge, and skill sets so that they can understand and manage their emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. Tonight, we will delve in a discussion about what are some ways to help benefit educators socially and emotionally. Tonight's first panelist that will be up is Mr. Rick Bolay. I'll give you a little brief bio on him.
Welcome to the Impact of Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast.
Mr. Bolay has been in public education for 2 decades. He holds both a bachelor's and a master's degree in science and educational administration and leadership. He is an orator. He's a speaker. He does so many things. He also serves as the president of the Texas State Teachers Association Region 10. There's so much to say about Rick, but enough of that. Let's go into the discussion. Mr. Bolay, please say hello to the people.
Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here today.
All right. Well, Mr. Rick Bolay, first question's for you. So describe some challenges that educators are facing today to build social, emotional skills.
Well, if I were to sum it up in one word, I would say technology. Both our greatest ally and our worst enemy. Let me explain by tossing a few statistics out there. A study by the advocacy group Pro-Literacy found that 30 million adult Americans, that's more than 1 in 10, cannot read, write, or do basic math above a 3rd grade level. The National Bureau of Economic Research says that children whose parents have those low literacy levels have a 72% chance of being at the lowest reading levels themselves. And they're more likely to get poor grades, display behavioral problems, have high absentee rates, repeat school years, or even drop out. Rand Institute released a report that states that 75% of state prison inmates did not complete high school or can be classified as low literate. And a study by the Pew Research Institute, and how this ties all in, found that an estimated 81% of Americans today own a smartphone. Back in 2011, that's less than 10 years ago, it was 35%. So in less than 10 years, we've moved from a third of the population to over 3/4 of it. And of course, the reason that I mention this is that it's also well documented that frequent use of digital devices causes distraction, reduced recognition of social cues and boundaries, and general misunderstandings that can help contribute to and cause interpersonal conflict. Now, our children, who are now truly digital natives, are still hardwired to react to those biological cues, but they are now starting to have a diminished ability to recognize and process them. So what SEL really represents for us is an attempt to maintain our biological forms of verbal and nonverbal communication in an increasingly digital yet less literate world. So those are several of the challenges that we face in trying to maintain our social and our emotional cues and building those skills.
Welcome to the Impact of Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast.
Okay, so we're talking about social problems here, and we have an expert with us on the panel that deals with social problems, social interaction, social communication. That would be Buddy Thornton, Dr. Buddy Thornton. That would be the case. Mr. Thornton, could you delve in on that discussion and kind of take off and give us your point of view of what Mr. Bollea just mentioned about technology and how it relates to social interactions in the society and also in education and even in the classroom, these social issues that sometimes some people say they have nothing to do at all with education, but they really do. Would you like to take a spin on that, sir?
Yes, thank you for the excellent statistical foundation, Mr. Bollea. There's two things that pop out in virtually all research about communication styles and what's happening between educators and students. It is true that as technology advances, people become more mired in looking at a two-dimensional reality, and they start processing at a lower level. Anywhere from, depending on how you look at the research, anywhere from 70% to 93% of communication is nonverbal. And when you are not presenting your cerebral cortex with enough visual cues to understand the nonverbal part of communication, you're robbing your senses and you're robbing your ability to be in tune with society. You can't be in tune with the teachers, you can't be in tune with your fellow students. What you become attuned to, as opposed to being in tune, you become attuned to a two-dimensional universe where finding information, it has more value than knowing information. And so you have to understand that because you're addressing a non-biological two-dimensional object as your source of information in most cases, you've unlearned the ability to deal with other biological people, and so you've removed the emotional part of communication, the nonverbal, being able to read people's facial expressions, being able to understand the tone of their voice, the direction that they're going with their nonverbal cues. You lose context. Context is the number one reason why people don't understand other people, and they start to fall further and further behind in the ability to understand why something is important, and so education takes a back seat to technology. And that's that tipping point that Mr. Bollé said. It's both a very, very good thing for society to have advanced technology, but it is, in effect, creating a huge barrier to moving forward with proper communication skills, which are, again, part of the educational process.
So then can we just say that this is a sort of a social support type of system? Because what I'm hearing from both you guys, I know, Rick, you mentioned technology, which opened up a can of worms, right? And then Buddy, you started talking about perceptions, and it's like, let me throw this at you real quick. How can you really use technology as a matrix? How can you measure education with technology? It's so many models that have not even been thought out yet, as far as linear models, you name it. Don't want to go too deep into that. I do want to tell Dove a little bit, or tailspin on what Buddy mentioned about perception, because perception is a key factor, right, of classification, and that's cross classification, you name it. What do teachers want to give students? They want to give them safety. They want the students to feel safe in school. If you have a kid that feels safe in the classroom, right? So that's one challenge of emotional health. That's one challenge of social health. That perception of being safe, right? Or being valued, or being welcome, or being treated fairly, right? And so there are many things that we can use as apparatus as it relates to technology to help train or teach our kids. But are we losing social interaction with technology? That's my question, Rick. Mr. Bollé.
There's a danger of that, yes. I think, and I agree with everything that Dr. Thornton said. What we're dealing with really is an issue of communication, right? And it's kind of a paradox that technology advances communication and access to knowledge and understanding in so many ways, but in the nonverbal and context clue and context cue standpoint, just like Dr. Thornton said, it also stunts it because it takes away that third dimension and reduces it to that two-dimensional realm, which makes it harder because our bodies are hardwired for reacting to those cues, right? Those biological cues, but now we don't have them. So it kind of leaves us in the dark. So technology can do a lot of things. It can be set up to measure numerous things. But we're also, at some point, we're still biological creatures, and our brains have to be able to process the information of those nonverbal cues, those social cues, for us to still be able to effectively communicate. And I think when it comes to classroom safety and feeling comfortable in a classroom, being able to establish those communication links is still the key. And I think that's where SEL really has its importance at, is that it maintains our awareness of and our ability to use those biological forms of verbal and nonverbal communication. So that's where the challenge lies, is that being able to integrate our technology advantages while mitigating the disadvantages that it can and has, to a large extent, already presented us.
That's the answer I was looking for, sir. Well said. Now, let me talk about Buddy Thornton.
Welcome to the Impact of Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast.
The doctor here. Buddy Thornton is born, he's a native of Texas. He's a Vietnam-era veteran. He holds a master's in human services counseling and executive leadership. He's a certified trainer for teacher effectiveness, mediations, and coaching leaders. His resume is far too vast for me to just go down the line here in one night segment. So I'm cutting it short. Buddy is finishing up on a host of things, projects. He is managing multiple businesses to include BCT Mediations Plus. So, Buddy Thornton, please say hello to the people, sir.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, it is an honor having you here, sir. I know Mr. Boulay was just talking about some very in-depth statistics, and we were talking about, ways of sustainability, though we didn't use that term, but that's what it is, sustaining improvements for experienced educators to communicate with staff and students, right? That's necessary to maintaining healthy social support, healthy personal growth, and also behavior management, I believe. And so it's with these perceptions that solidify the experience for these teachers to then go and consult with other educators and kind of share notes. My next question is for you, Mr. Thornton, and Rick Boulay too. How can the education system better prepare educators and students through civic engagement?
I think one of the biggest perceptions that students have when they walk into a classroom is they question whether or not they are cared about, whether they're respected, whether they're going to be given an equal footing. I understand that all students know that a teacher is obviously a little older, more experienced, more educated. They're there to teach. But the students don't feel as if they belong in the classroom unless the teachers, utilizing those nonverbal and some verbal cues, show them universal positive regard, show them that they do care for them as a human being first, that they're actually curious about their worldview. They're curious about what is going to allow the teacher into their minds, and you can't get into their minds without also engaging their hearts. And some teachers have a gift. They can really do that. They do it very well. I think civic engagement is necessary to support teachers actually building that case that they care about their students enough to impart knowledge impartially, fairly, that they can openly discuss any biases that are present in the population in the classroom without allowing it to become an emotional morass, a problem for all of the students. Students are very aware, they're very sophisticated. They do know that everyone in the classroom is different. They know they're all unique, and yet teachers have been taught for decades that they need to treat them all the same, and students feel like if they're just going to be part of the alphabet soup, why should they care about what the teacher's teaching them? And the technology advancement has actually accelerated that feeling that the student is, yes, unique, but that they don't need the teachers, that now they have access to information. So we have to get past that stumbling block, and the teachers have to be willing to engage in a way that the students understand that the teacher, A, cares for them as a person, cares about the outcome of the teaching environment, and can embrace psychologically that student into that environment in a way that the student wants to learn, doesn't feel like they have to learn, but they want to learn.
That was powerful. I think that was very pinpointed in the question that I asked. And what I heard that came from that was two words, and those two words are connection and confidence. How do you connect while building confidence to help students engage in civic engagement? Rick Boulay, you want to take that?
Welcome to the Impact of Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast.
Yeah, I will, actually. I really love the way he focused on the student end of it. I would tag on to that by saying that we also need to prepare educators and school systems to do that. And I think you do that first by having schools and school districts adopting deliberate policies for the use of SEL that are thoroughly integrated at all the levels. Secondly, I think the schools should use every community interface opportunity that they have and create where they need to thoroughly communicate that system to the community and encourage its involvement. The last thing I think I would recommend is that schools should utilize higher education systems, either directly or remotely, to offer classes to cultivate those social-emotional communication skills, especially when with an emphasis for parents of elementary students at varying levels. There's a survey back in 2013 that showed that nearly 60% of their parents, even back then, used their smartphone or tablet as what you could call a digital babysitter. So, with the increase in smartphone usage that I mentioned earlier, there's a real need for us to intervene at the earliest possible moment to prevent that distraction from becoming habitual. I'd also work with higher ed institutions to provide classes for parents of adolescent children to increase awareness of dealing with the technology as a part of parenting, so that you really get almost like a wraparound service at all levels, so that the community and the schools and the faculty are all working together so that the students feel that comfort and that confidence that SEL and those nonverbal cues are going to be worked on and built and reinforced throughout their educational experience.
Rick, that was very succinct to the SEL question I asked you previously, and I appreciate that response, sir. And what I heard from you was caring, because you have to have, all of this will be submitted through the feeling of care, meaning if the students or the people that you engage with, whether it's staff, whoever you're consulting, if they feel that caring, right? If they feel that caring mixed with connection, mixed with confidence, then you got something. So now how do we measure that? Well, we got to do surveys maybe. We got to survey the different, like you mentioned, programs. So the social action programs have to be measured through these surveys. Or there could be some other way of measuring. I like to call it psychosocial indicators, right, for participation, maybe. And so, but with this caring response, right, someone can now measure to see, okay, I'm helping this person, he or she, and these are the results by this survey. What did you get from this program? What did you get from this educator? What did you get from this consultant? And now we have something to compare notes with. Am I off track here? Buddy, you want to come in and help me out here, sir?
No, I think you're dead on. I think the most important thing that people don't understand is that children take their cues from all of the caregivers in their environment. The most contemporary research shows that when you talk about quality time, specific time that parents get to spend with their children, especially their teenage children, averages 37 minutes a day. 37 minutes a day to be the most important role model in a child's life just is not sufficient. What we have to do is we have to explain to teachers that if they have the students, regardless of whether they're moving from class to class to class, the compendium, the collaborative group of teachers have these children's attention for 4 to 5 hours a day, easily 7 to 8 times, 700% increase in quality time in front of these kids. And so the teachers, especially in middle school and high school, have a far greater impact over the kids compared to the parents because of just the raw face time, the raw quality face time. Compare that to other research that shows that when you take the caregiver out of the equation, the student-to-student interaction can be anywhere from 2 to 5 hours a day because of after school no programs or latchkey scenarios. They're interacting with each other far more than they are the teachers or the parents. And what we have to do is we have to get educators to understand that we need to engage with the students so that they care about their education and they understand that they need to pick their role models and they need to interact, and without those nonverbal cues that we can go back to the very beginning of this conversation, they don't feel like they're being engaged with because they've lost the ability to believe that when they look someone in the face and look them in the eye that they're seeing something there that person cares about them. So number one, you go back to those nonverbal cues and you have to reduce the amount of technology time that these kids have and increase the amount of quality time absent the technology so that they still maintain a human emotional fabric in their worldview.
Welcome to the Impact of Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would also, what he's saying is absolutely true and absolutely crucial. And that the feedback in the survey that you mentioned earlier, is an important part of making sure that that's happening and an important part of the system. But the kids will know, and it's important for us to not do like a knee-jerk reaction, throwing spaghetti on the wall kind of thing. It has to be something that's deliberate. It has to be something that is intentional, and the kids have to know it's intentional and followed through with, so that it is a part of their life that they can become dependent on and understand that it's going to be there for them and that they can utilize it so that they feel comfortable using it and can do all of those very important things that Dr. Thornton just mentioned.
That's tied to maintaining healthy relationships, and real quick and I'll be done here, and that's tied to developing a growth mindset. It's also tied to developing self-determination and building on strengths and turning challenges into opportunities. Go ahead, buddy.
No, you need to give them a voice in the equation. You need to give them a seat at the table. You need to allow them to participate in the decision-making process of how to improve the communication and the quality of communication. They need to obviously have guidance and they need to show growth, but at the same time, if you don't allow them to participate in the decision-making process, research has shown that you get less than 10% buy-in if you force a decision on them as opposed to allowing them to participate in the decision process. They must feel like they were heard.
There is no empowerment like ownership. Absolutely.
Totally agree. Let me ask you another question, Mr. Thornton here. Let's talk about some ways educators can sustain or achieve social and emotional abilities as a teacher or as a consultant or just as an educator.
Welcome to the Impact of Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast.
I think one of the most important things that educators can do is they can make an effort to participate in the social dynamic of the entire campus. They don't always have access to the students away from the campus, but within the campus atmosphere, when they're not in a teaching role, they need to still be in an authority figure role, but they also need to make that a soft approach. They need kids to understand that they are approachable, that they are there to provide them with a quality day, a quality environment where there's no fear, that they believe that they can engage with the teacher, they can ask them questions, There are students who are very outgoing. There are students who are not so outgoing. They're very, very introverted, and they need to be able to approach a teacher and say, "Can I talk to you? I've got a problem, and can I discuss it with you?" And we don't want teachers to become counselors. That's not their role, but they need to be approachable because the students need to believe that they care. And the third leg of that three-legged stool is if a teacher is not approachable, a student will not buy into the other two. No matter how you treat them, no matter how good you are to them, if they don't believe they can approach you within the school environment, you're going to lose them in any case. So the one sustainable issue is, can teachers actually put themselves in a position to allow students to engage with them with proper distancing in the school environment and make the kids feel like this is a place where they can come and they can learn and they can live. They can thrive. That's what they need to be able to do. They need to feel like they can thrive. And that's one of the things that's missing in a lot of the schools that I've visited.
Well, sustainability costs money. Sustainability costs money. Sustainability costs money. Why should so much of our local budget go to education? Rick Boulay, you want to take that?
Education makes everything else possible. Without educating and having people learn and having people understand, right? That's a promotion of isolationism, right? We learn better, we communicate better when we are educated, when we take the time to educate each other, when we work to learn, when we get that learning mindset, that growth mindset that you alluded to earlier. Education is the key to everything.
And educators need to have the same type of unconditional positive regard that the students should be afforded, and it should come from the parents, it should come from the administrators, it should come from the general public. When the question about pay comes up, it needs to be a universal statement that, yes, they are completely and unequivocally underpaid, and it's because they are the one resource that the world can never do without.
Welcome to the Impact of Educational Leadership Talk Show podcast, hosted by ID3. This show is designed to provide an exclusive forum on educational achievement gaps related to learning success while discovering relationships and family issues in diverse settings.